Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, Vice President of the Louisiana Association of Professional Auctioneers, otherwise known as LAPA. Now, in the previous video, I talked to you briefly about the upcoming sales tax lawsuit against Henderson Auctions, Marvin Henderson. Or Jeff Henderson, now the owner of the firm JAH Enterprises that is being sued, who is also a member of the Louisiana Auctioneers Licensing Board, notwithstanding the fact that Governor Jindal's own revenue secretary says, hey, you owe us over $200,000 in unpaid sales taxes. Now, again, we talked about continuing education and how we believe we're delivering the best you can get in that regard. So I want to take just a moment. I know a number of people are bound to be interested in the lawsuit that Marvin Henderson has filed himself. And I guess the lesson to be observed here is that whenever you're dealing in your own account, that is to say you own the merchandise you're seeking to auction, you can run into some sticky situations, particularly if you are in partnership with someone else who has an ownership interest in that particular items that you are attempting to auction off. And I know that there was a little brief segment there, a gentleman was looking at what they call penny auction, and board member James Sims asked him, will you own these items? He said yes. Mr. Sims says, well then that's against the law, you can't auction it. Now, Ms. Dow did quickly correct him that that's not the case. You most certainly can auction items that you have ownership interest in, but as I said, it can be a touchy situation, it can be sticky, and if you are in partnership with somebody else who also owns those items that you're auctioning, it can really get to be a sticky situation. And that's what we're going to talk about now, because that is what entails a lawsuit that Marvin Henderson's firm, Henderson Auctions, has recently had to file against a gentleman named Everett. Now I'm going to step to the side for just a moment, because we have the link for the lawsuit itself, but I realize that many folk would say, well gee, can you just let me know what's going on so that I don't have to go read this lengthy lawsuit. So here's the situation. JAH Enterprises, that is Jeffrey Henderson's firm, Jeffrey Henderson being the one sitting on the board, but it's a DBA that's known as Henderson Auctions. Now Mr. Blake Everett is a gentleman who used to work at Henderson Auctions some years ago, and he broke off, but yet Henderson Auction would still very often have dealings with Mr. Everett along with his father, Sam Everett. And in one such dealing, you may remember not long back on Henderson Auction's website, they were auctioning off a casino boat. It was the Crown Casino, all right? What happened in that situation is Mr. Henderson, along with Mr. Everett, went in together and they paid $600,000 for the boat itself. Thereafter, they made approximately $300,000 in maintenance costs and the preparation for the sale of the casino boat. Now, they made efforts to get this boat sold, and the best offer they were able to come up with entailed a sale for $350,000, that's this line coming down here, $350,000 plus a home located in, you have to forgive me, I'm not from Mississippi, so this one's a little bit of a stretch for me, but I'm going to call it Kosciuszko. Hopefully I'm close. You can see it right here, Kosciuszko, and I'm going to call it Kosciuszko, Mississippi. The name of the house is called the Ivory House, and the plan was that obviously they take this $350,000, you can do the math here and see that they still need $550,000 to break even. So the plan was that they would auction off the Ivory House as well as its contents. Now, I believe at this point my camera has reached the point at which we are in there, so I'm going to take just a moment to step behind the camera. We're going to lower it just a tad so that you can continue to see what transpired. There we go. That should get us to the bottom. And let's see if we can't zoom in a tad. There we go. And we'll come back and lower it one more time in just a second. There we go. All right, so we were at the point just a second ago of stating that they are now have accepted the $350,000, leaving them $550,000 short of covering what they have in the property. But they have this house over in Cosvisco, Mississippi. For those of you who are in my father's native state of Mississippi, if I'm mispronouncing that, please forgive me. So they have the Ivy House and the contents. All right. In the lawsuit, what is claimed by Henderson is that Everett placed the house in an LLC which was in his name only. And then there was an attempt to auction off the house and the contents and leave Mr. Henderson out of the loop. So you see what I'm saying about whenever you start talking about dual ownership, auctioning off things in which you have an interest, boy, it can really get to be a sticky situation here. What do you bet the Hendersons would confirm for you? This got to be a sticky situation. It still is a sticky situation. All right, the Hendersons get wind of this, okay? They don't like it, understandably so. From their vantage point, we have a gentleman here who is trying to abscond with this money and leave the Hendersons holding the bag for the balance of what it took to procure that boat and get it ready for sale. By my math, and I think I'm fairly accurate, $550,000. All right? So the Hendersons file a temporary restraining order once they get wind of this planned liquidation of the Ivy House along with the contents through public auction and leaving the Hendersons out of the loop on receiving any of the funds. All right, now, bear in mind Mr. Everett has not yet filed an answer to this lawsuit. In fact, last I checked, which was August 29th, the file did not contain any evidence that he had been served at this point. However, Mr. Henderson makes certain assertions that Blake Everett, and the B here would be short for Blake, I really should have used an E, but he states that Mr. Everett, or Blake, we'll revert to say calling him by his first name, Blake, he claims that Henderson owes him $500,000 in commissions and time related to procuring this boat to be ready to sell. That's what Henderson says that Blake Everett is alleging. Mr. Henderson, on the other hand, says that Blake owes them $87,741.43. Now, they were involved in other transactions together. I'm not going to get bogged down into the details. In fact, we don't have the details. We just have statements that they were involved in other transactions, some of which resulted in profits, some of which resulted in losses. The Hendersons claims naturally they're entitled to a share of the profits, but they would also have to take an offset their share of the losses. Obviously, there's a difference of opinion over who owes what to whom. That's my core lesson to relay, is that this thing can get sticky when you have multiple parties having an interest in what you're attempting to auction. All right, I believe at this point I've probably reached the bottom of that part. And so we're going to lower it one last time. And we're going to talk about just what's being asserted in the Henderson auction lawsuit. All right? All right, just what all's going on here in this most recent lawsuit. And you have a link for it for the attorneys on this distribution list, and I know there are many of them. You can certainly feel free to read the lawsuit in full if you'd like, but we have tried to give you the highlights of it so that if you choose not to read a 10 or 12, 15-page lawsuit, you'll get the gist of it. What are the Hendersons alleging? Well, they are alleging that by putting this house in the LLC and trying to auction off the contents, there was a breach of fiduciary duty. All right? The parties of the contract would certainly have a fiduciary duty to have fair dealings with one another. Clearly, the Hendersons feel that that there has been a breach of that fiduciary duty here. They also allege a breach of contract and that the dealings were done in bad faith. All right? They are saying that by putting this Ivy House and its contents to an LLC name on which they claim only Mr. Everett had an interest in and trying to obtain the proceeds from it, they assert that that is a breach of contract and a demonstration of bad faith. Now, before you start talking about fraud, you always have to have a material misrepresentation that was justifiably relied upon to someone's detriment. And that is the third element that Mr. Henderson's attorneys are alleging, that there was a detrimental reliance upon these statements that would have been made by the Everetts that, hey, we're going to auction off these properties and the contents, and we'll be dividing up the proceeds. Mr. Henderson, or the Hendersons, had justifiably relied upon those assertions. All right, the fourth element of the lawsuit says that there was conversion, fraud, and misrepresentation. All of that going back to the core issue of did I justifiably rely upon the representations that were made? So they are asserting that there was conversion, fraud, and misrepresentation. Now, what are the remedies being sought? They want the judge to issue a declaratory judgment. Basically, in a nutshell, it wants a number of things to be asserted in the Henderson's favor, that there would be no allocation for the time factor, which Mr. Everett claims he is entitled to. They want a detailed accounting and things of that nature. In fact, that's the sixth element of the lawsuit. A true and fair accounting of who owes what here. So, as I said, we believe we are delivering to you some of the best continuing education out there because we present to you actual situations. All right? We're not talking about going into some textbook and talking about theory. We bring to you real live administrative hearings for auctioneers. And we go above that and we'll even point out situations such as this that will probably never be discussed by the Auctioneers Licensing Board, nor should it, because it involves a dispute between parties. Now, there could be some potential, perhaps, I don't know, with the Mississippi Board, if in fact some of Mr. Henderson's allegations are true, it would, I don't know which auctioneer may have been about to do this. Those type of specifics are not contained within the lawsuit. But there may be some potential if the auctioneer knew that the Hendersons may have been entitled to some proceeds and there was going to nevertheless be an effort to sell this and circumvent them getting the proceeds. So we believe by presenting actual real life examples of this type of situation, we are benefiting all auctioneers. So what do they say? It's always toughest to learn a lesson the hard way. But you can always remember, well, gee, I know so-and-so did this, and boy, did it get problematic for him. So, if you are considering auctioning merchandise in which there would be joint, first of all, if you have ownership interest, that in itself may create a problem. But secondly, if you are in partnership with someone else on the sale of property through auction, you better make darn sure that you have a very high level of trust in whomever you form that partnership with, because when things go south, all of a sudden, what's going on here is there's a pie. And everybody's sticking their hands in saying, I am entitled to that pie. And the problem is there's only so much pie to go around. If the allegations of Mr. Henderson's lawsuit are correct, Mr. Everett tried to get too much pie. And that's what it boils down to. Mr. Henderson tries to come in, or the Henderson try to come in and say, we're entitled to that pie. But guess what happens? Now you're going to have lawyers coming in, and they're going to get their part of that pie. So what's guaranteed is the pie is going to be smaller. So the moral of that lesson is, if you decide to go in partnership with somebody for the auction of goods, have a very, very, very high level of trust with the person or persons that you're partnered with. So once again, this is Robert Burns, Vice President of the Louisiana Association of Professional Auctioneers, and it has been our pleasure to deliver to you this real-life instance of continuing education and the forewarning to be careful when you have an ownership interest in what you're auctioning, and especially if you've partnered with someone else and they too have an ownership interest. Thank you for tuning in. We look forward to bringing you future video coverage of more auctioneer licensing board meetings, and we believe that what we're delivering to you is of maximum benefit in your auction career. Thank you so much again, once again, ladies and gentlemen.